Hello, everyone. So, for my final project, I decided to answer the question: what are the societal factors that facilitate code switching between English and Arabic? So, the methodology that I used for this project was a research paper, and so I uh, looked through different sources like ASU libraries, which have tons of academic research journals. And I also used some of my personal experiences with code switching because I was born in a diglossic community, so I was just always exposed to code switching, which is actually why I'm doing this project because really interested in it. So, what is code switching? Code switching defined is the act of conversing and interchangeably using another language than the mother tongue. So it can be a mixture or combination of words and phrases that effectively elicit a specific point. So, throughout my findings, I realized that code switching can be analyzed through three perspectives: are grammatical, psycholinguistic, and sociolinguistic. The main scope of my paper was through a sociolinguistic perspective, but I feel like it's also important to understand the other aspects. So, from a grammatical aspect of code switching, that's just basically talking about how both grammatical functions of a language work together to make one unit. So, for example, there are some clauses and different verbs that won't work when you code switch between English and Arabic. So it's essentially kind of important to be um, fluent in both languages to know the grammatical difference between code switching. The psycholinguistic perspective just basically analyzes the brain's interpretation of code switching. So, for example, you would find people who are bilinguals, and they would use code switching to help them come up with a specific point. There are subordinate bilinguals who actually use code switching to who actually have a learned dominant language, but they would use code switching to learn another language. So, for example, if I were fluent in Arabic and not English, I would code switch in order to learn, even though that kind of contradicts the idea of the grammatical perspective, but essentially it just helps them learn language. Finally, sociolinguistic perspective analyzes the micro level of conversation and the macro level of conversation. So that basically means the micro level of conversation is basically how a person would interact within a smaller speech community and talk to close relatives or friends. So it's just your natural way of speaking. The macro level of conversation, which is actually sort of a taboo from where I come from, which is to not code switch within larger interactional communities because generally we'd want to focus on speaking one language, which is Arabic. But it is also possible to use macro level conversation within larger speech communities, so it's not that looked frowned upon. Analysis. This is essentially what I researched, and it just talks about the appropriate situations where people use code switching, and throughout the various journals that I looked over, there are a lot of different ways that people code switch between English and Arabic. One of them is a religious or cultural reference. So, for example, in this research paper, one of the participants was recorded saying they had a beautiful mubkhara, which basically translates to they had a beautiful incense burner. So in this case, code switching is kind of, I wouldn't say enforced, but encouraged because you wouldn't say incense burner, especially if you're talking to someone else who knows what a mubkhara is. Um, Another important aspect of code switching, specifically in the Middle Eastern region, is gender differences. So, in this source, I found out that women used more loanwords in English than their male counterparts. And so, in this study, one of the females mentioned that العرس كان amazing وكان شكلها wow. So in the example here, it really literally translates to the wedding was amazing and she looked wow. You can actually see the different words that are thrown in English, which is basically just to show how a lot of the conversations that women have are basically feminine topics, and that's something that is closely tied to Arabic culture, which is how every gender is supposed to talk about different subjects. So, for example, you have the typical, oh, guys talk about sports and politics, and then females talk about weddings and um, whatever females usually talk about. Another aspect of different uses of code switching was politeness and respect. In this study, the researcher found that people who code switch between English and Arabic actually used it to make the sentence seem more respectful rather than disrespectful. And so in this case, the person is addressing someone else named Bashir, which is the first word here. And so he says, Bashir, lo samaht, shut up. Literally translated, that means Bashir, please shut up. If that phrase were to be said directly in Arabic, it would be perceived as rude and the person wouldn't take it lightly. And in this case, adding shut up in English kind of eases that strain. I also focused on code switching on social media because that's where a lot of code switching generally happens. You would just be switching between different verbs and adjective phrases all the time while texting. And so this study talked about code switching on Facebook. And so this researcher said that 10 reasons for online code switching are lack of facility, lack of registral competence, mood of the speaker, trying to emphasize a point, habitual expressions, semantic significance to show identity with a particular group, to address a different audience, pragmatics, and attracting attention. Now, throughout the research journal, this person had examples for all of these 10 points, but for the time constraint that I have, I'm just going to talk about one of them, and which is lack of facility. And so this person made a Facebook post or analyzed a Facebook post of one person talking to his other friend, and he says, "El akhbar ya man," which is literally just translated to "What's up, man?" And so, not that there's anything wrong in saying that alone in Arabic. Saying it in English kind of gives the conversation a way to flow, to just basically show the other person that, oh, okay, like just to keep the conversation going, essentially. And so what ties into that is how a lot of people who are specifically online would use code switching to express competency in English or to reflect social status. So it always ties back to one of these 2 points. So what does this all mean? Essentially, it means that for me, code switching is just basically someone talking in his or her natural state. So it's just whatever makes you feel comfortable. Although some people use it to learn, some people use it to reflect social status, like people on social media, or to express competency. It just always ties back to how the person feels comfortable using code switching. And here's my website. Thank you.